So today I'm on my home patch back in Sussex and really excited to be talking with Jay from Survivors Network. And I would say Survivors Network Brighton, but you guys are getting big. You're Survivors Networks all of Sussex these days, is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Oh, well, it is. It feels good to be back on the south coast. I feel full of spring. Um, and it's been so gorgeous traveling around the country connecting with different organizations, but there is something about coming home and seeing some familiar faces even if it's still on a screen, and yeah, being able to check in with people and basically say, how are you, Jay? How are you? How are the team? How is Survivors Network?
Yeah, well, it's really nice to have this chat with you. And actually, Nina, it's been great to kind of follow on social media, see your journey. But what's also been lovely are the real postcards that you've sent us. We actually, the vagaries of the postal service, we actually got two on the same day, and it looked like you
Oh,
posted
really?
like a month before. So
Yeah, it's something weird. Over Christmas, I think all the postcards got held up. I don't know.
someone obviously forgot about that post box or whatever, but it's so nice to a bit like us in our own personal lives. It's just nice to know that someone's thinking about you and rooting for you, particularly because it's been a hard time. I think it's been a hard
Mm.
time for us all, personally and socially, as well as professionally, and we've had to learn new ways of doing things, and some of those things have gone well and some of the things haven't gone so well, and I guess that's how life is, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I'm very excited for the spring coming, and to really to take stock of the learning that we've made over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, and to take some of that forward, but also to reconnect with the things that perhaps we've lost or that have made things more challenging. So I guess
Mm.
that's a bit of an overview to how the team mixed.
Mixed, yeah. And have you got a sense of what that learning is, or is that you actually need some space and some quiet to kind of allow those things to emerge still?
I think it's again mixed. It's we do know a lot of the learning, but of course there will be more learning to come that we don't know. And I don't want to ever say we've finished learning. We're in the midst of actually looking at our values, and we've done a kind of an ongoing like a bit of consultation work. And one of the things that came out really strongly was this learning and unlearning, and kind of growth and development, and I love that as an
Mm.
organization, because it very much ties into my approach is I don't think we'll ever have finished learning,
Oh, no
um,
way.
and so
Mhm.
yeah, like some of the great things that have come out of the pandemic are about different ways of making connections. Probably remember yourself from chatting to rape crisis centers and survivor support organizations, doing online counselling. Yeah, that was quite radical. It was something that we didn't think would be able to work. Having online meetings,
Mm.
it was like maybe, but I don't think we'll be able to. But actually, look, we've probably made like advances of 10 years in terms of digital innovation in the first 6 months of the pandemic, and it was hard and it wasn't all great, but actually we are really resilient and adaptable. We can try new things and then tweak and amend and make them work, and we have a whole range of, I don't know, groups and sessions running, some which might be out and about in parks, on walks, some which are how we traditionally met people, some which are online. I mean, I don't think I would have done this with you, and I certainly wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing it as I do now pre-pandemic, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some good things. I don't think we would be on this trip. Not in this way. I think you can't help but be shaped by your past. Like we all know this, don't we? And I guess it's about recognizing that and celebrating the bits that you're grateful for, and also recognizing the bits where you're like, actually I could have done without that life lesson. And I guess eventually you get to the point where you're not sure, you really just, it's just growth, and change and flow. And yeah, we're definitely grateful recipients of some changes through the last, what have been, like, gosh, I wonder when I feel like I've got the opportunity to kind of take stock. I still, I feel like I've been saying for a very long time, I need to take stock. And now we have the whole, awful situation in the Ukraine. And it's just like, wow, what a time to be just alive, let alone doing this work. And so Cynthia and I are almost like, oh my, that retreat center that we're journeying towards slowly. It's like, I fully appreciate some of you need an invitation there right now. Like, can I book in for 6 months, please? And I feel part of our energy is also about, yeah, I just need a bit of a pause. Is there a pause button on this ride? But yeah,
it's really interesting. So I just spoke at a conference today on supporting survivors of gender-based violence, and one of the, I was on a panel discussion, and one of the questions they asked was about improved support for victims, but I wanted to sort of reframe it or say an alternative perspective, because sometimes when you're on a panel, you want to, it can be a bit boring if everyone says the same sorts of things. And I wanted to bring in that if you've got a largely female workforce, or even if you haven't, you're very likely to have lots of your staff, your volunteers, your trustees who are survivors themselves. And certainly if we're looking at things like street harassment, I know that when there was that recent stats that came out that 95% of young women had experienced street harassment, myself, I'm sure like many other women were thinking, well, who are those 5%?
yeah, yeah, just don't walk around in public places.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll give you a bit of a shout out there. But I did speak about your online retreat, the how to heal from trauma, because we are providing new staff with the opportunity to do the retreat. When you start a new job, in the first 2 weeks you've got so much time, and then later you're like, why didn't I use
no time? Yeah.
And I would really urge everyone out there to recognize the importance of taking care of yourself. I mean, people who know me will laugh because I can talk the talk, but I'm absolutely terrible at really doing it. But I'm trying, and I found one of the things I really liked about your retreat was that it gave alternative suggestions. It wasn't a one size fits all. I know it sounds obvious, but there were, some of the results I was like, no, I played it.
Yep.
Not for me.
Not for me. Yeah.
But this activity, wow, that really touched me. That's one I need to go back and visit again. And I just think that perhaps we don't have enough space for a lot of that learning, and it's really important to map that into our busy days.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if we were raised in a culture that genuinely took our emotional and spiritual well-being as something of, as important as, our physical hygiene and our mental intelligence, I think we would live our lives in really quite a different way, because there's something about every day we get up and we go where we need to go for the day, but we make sure we're, our clothes are clean, we've washed our bodies and all the rest of it, and we're eating. So we know that we have to do all these things just to function in society, and that it's normal. And it's like, can you imagine if it would be strange to rock up at work having not quite grounded your energy that morning? Like, everyone else would be like, oh, you've come in here. Have you meditated this morning? Like, do you think you need to do that before you kind of come in here into this space? And I just wonder how different would it be if we centered that a bit more and saw that it was as essential as cleaning our teeth and as obvious to everybody else as walking around in dirty clothes, if we haven't looked after our souls this morning. But I think we've got more of this, can I squeeze it into 20 minutes on my commute, because that's what I've got. And cool, if that's what you've got, let's work with that.
Yeah, or I'll just put another load of washing in the washing machine on this spare 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've got 5 minutes. I'll do my breathing exercises. Yeah, it's busy worlds. And I guess, yeah, I feel like I always get curious about the questions we're asking around that. And are we asking the right questions around our well-being? Is it placed in the right place? But I mean, you're talking to someone who wants to open a retreat center, so like obviously like my path is ahead of me. Although the way is not clear, I have to say.
Yeah, well, I think certainly I'm, in a position of sort of power and influence that I never expected I'd be. I wasn't one of these people, I wasn't brought up to have, I don't know, that sounds a bit depressing, but the sort of aspiration that I hope my children are brought up to have. So I didn't ever see myself as, a CEO or leading an organization. And probably a lot of people, particularly a lot of women who are getting, the positions of influence. I mean, I guess we all have influence, and it's really important to sort of own that, but also to recognize it. But it is really difficult about balancing the priorities. Like, obviously, well-being is really important, but we also know that there's huge levels of demand, and we need to do a high quality job. We also need to, I don't know, like look at our external reputation, for example, or look at who our key partners are. There's quite a lot of competing priorities, and it's really interesting, but it is also interesting at how different ones rise up at different times. So I guess what I'm saying is it's really useful for me to continue having these conversations, with you, with other people, to just help be I guess a well-rounded leader who takes in all the perspectives.
So what was your journey into this work if you weren't expecting to be doing what you're doing today?
Well, I left home when I was quite young, probably because I didn't think I had anything to learn from anyone.
And now you're perpetually learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. Though I was brought up in the Midlands, and it was probably a time where there wasn't a lot of aspiration in that kind of small town community that I was brought up in, and I, ended up sort of doing different things, but eventually landed coming to university in Brighton, and I've got a degree in philosophy, and I really knew nothing of feminism. I was brought up thinking feminism was a bit of a dirty word, and or even like a bit naff, a bit embarrassing. And I went through, my degree, and I probably quietly had feminist views, but just didn't really recognize them, because I did find it a bit frustrating that it was all like old men with beards, pontificating.
All the people you're reading, right, in your philosophy degree. Yeah.
All the people reading and all the professors.
Yeah.
And I also at the same time worked at a children's home, and I found I was much more enjoying the work at the children's home, where it felt like, I think probably living my values and really having a sense of making an impact was the most important thing to me, but also was a sense of family. So I then had my own family when I left university. I was quite a young parent, and I, really devoted the next 10 years to that. And then it was only when I thought, okay, enough children now, that I thought, well, actually, maybe I do want to do something else in the world. And it feels like I shifted a gear a bit. But again, I didn't have a great sense of direction over and above really wanting to have an impact. And I think I, tried a few different roles, but I ended up as training as an intermediary, supporting people with communication in the criminal justice system. And then I am a real kind of passionate advocate for communication. And once I'd had a little glimpse inside the criminal justice system, I was both fascinated and appalled, I guess.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating and so interesting, but also it almost seems like it's designed to not facilitate communication. It seems like it's designed to keep the power within the clutches of the judges and the barristers, and actually perhaps even, I'm sure this won't be controversial to say in this space, but I always felt like it was disregarding the people who actually were seeking the justice, or the people who were we're talking about suspects and defendants as well, the people who have got an active role in defending themselves against what the charges were, and yeah, there's so many anachronistic elements of it that just seems completely out of place. And so I really enjoyed finding out about that system and trying to explain it to people and help people engage in that process who would otherwise struggle to understand what was happening. I mean, sometimes I struggled to understand what was happening in it.
Yeah, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it's really hard to explain. It's really hard to explain, and I'd say the same for jurors as well. I think we have this trial by jury as it's held up as a world-beating system or whatever, and many jurors, you could even sort of look from their faces, really struggled to follow what was going on, or might ask the judge's question, and sometimes the judge's responses were patronising and condescending, and it just felt like, is this the best we can do?
Yeah, but that's a good question. It seems like we like good questions.
Yeah, definitely. Well, no, it's not. But I guess that doing that role probably had an impact on me, and how much time I have for my family. And so when I saw the role of ISVA coordinator at Survivors Network, it fitted really well with this wanting to make an impact in the criminal justice system, but also my kind of growing interest in issues related to feminism. I think I probably had my feminist awakening was when my first child was a couple of weeks old, or maybe she was a couple of months old, and her dad took her to the supermarket and had someone come and stop him and say, "Oh, aren't you great looking after the baby and doing the shopping as well?" And I was enraged. I was like, every day, and no one has ever said anything to me.
Yeah.
And once you start noticing it,
then it's everywhere.
So I was ISVA coordinator for probably 3 or 4 years, and then when our former CEO left, I had no thoughts about the CEO role, but a number of people in the organisation were like, "Oh, have you thought about it, Jay? Have you thought about it?" And I didn't think of myself in those terms, but actually, you know what it's like when you start preparing for a job and you start doing the research. Before you know it, you're like, "Oh, I really want this." And then when I was successful, I was so pleased. And I think the first year was, a bit out your depth, like when you step up into a big job. But I feel like it's just the right place for me now, and I'm really, and it's hard. It continues to be hard, and I think it probably will never stop being hard. And I think that someone said, was it like resilience is a muscle, or resilience, is kind of, and I feel like that's one of the things I've really grown and developed, is this ability to be resilient, but without losing, the kind of listening and hearing and learning and unlearning and really wanting to improve things.
And in terms of your desire to have a role in the world that has an impact, how are you sitting with that desire now? Are you in exactly the place you want to be with that?
Oh, I think what I need to do is, we can't have an impact on our own. I mean, we can have a small impact on our own, but I think in order to have the greatest impact, we need to work with, or the way that I approach it. I think there's loads of different. I'm really comfortable in holding different perspectives and recognizing that different people come at things in different ways, and actually that's really important and really useful. And I'm not a sort of a radical leader, and I'm not about kind of tearing systems down. Although, in my heart of heart, I think that systems probably could do with being torn down. But and I really value that other people do occupy those spaces, but I'm very much a sort of collaborative, longer term strategic, bringing people with me, winning over the hearts and minds, and maybe being a critical friend to organizations that need to be developing and moving with the times, and also listening to people who are feeding back to us how we need to sort of grow and develop. So I am impatient for change, and I constantly feel like it's not happening quick enough. I'm not having enough impact, and what more can I do? But then I also try and balance that with a bit of kindness to myself. and recognise that that collaborative partnership working takes time, that change is slow, and or change is it may be slow and then quick and then slow and then quicker, a bit like we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. But actually, it's really important to take stock of what is happening and developing, rather than focusing on the bits that you haven't achieved yet.
Yeah. I find that question of like, am I having an impact? It's such a crucial one to kind of reflect on, and also notice, like you're saying, your own process around it. And I feel like increasingly, I don't know that I get to have a very clear lens on the impact I'm having, because, I these days, I'll encounter someone who found a book I made 8 years ago, right? And then they may tell me something about something that book was able to help them with. And like, so I love this idea of these ripple effects out there that I'll have zero awareness of. So I guess eventually it has to be just trusting yourself and the work. But it's hard if you're hungry for things to improve. Like, so I recognize the frustration and the impatience too.
I'm never going to lose that fire, I don't think.
No, I think it's real, isn't it? And I think also there's something about, if you work in the sector you and I choose to place ourselves in, you bear witness to a lot of suffering, and it's uncomfortable, and it would be strange to not be moved by that and not be driven by that. And is it the only thing that drives us? Like, no, like there's also some very positive sides to this work that I'm equally motivated by. Like, I meet awesome, courageous people who absolutely knock me off my socks, and like they just inspire me, because I'm like, wow. These would be people that, like, I always describe them as kind of like the mountaineers of the human psyche, like that they've had to climb their own personal Mount Everest, and they did it. And I'm inspired by their journey and their stories and their failures and their successes. And so, like, this work is also that. But yeah, I think I find the balance tricky. I very rarely, get it right. Sometimes I just wake up pissed off, and pissed off is not me at my best. It's not my best energy. But if I can get myself, the days when I'm just inspired and trusting the process, then I feel like I can get some good work done, which is a relief.
Definitely. And you're right about how we can't always bring our best selves to everything, and we need to sort of accept that. But also, it can be difficult to hold that. Sometimes I feel that I hold very high expectations of myself, and then I'm perhaps feel overwhelmed by other people holding such high expectations of me, and maybe it starts with me.
Yeah, definitely. That's also doing this work is this endless invitation to work on yourself, right? It feels like it is the work sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely, that's so true.
Yeah. So how are you talked about Survivors Network and this desire to kind of reflect on the lessons from the past 2 years, and I'm just curious about where are your learning edges as an organization at the moment? Have you got new things that you're focusing on, maybe internally? Maybe now is a great time to have some, I think inward facing energy is a good thing in this space. Or maybe it feels it's more outward at the moment in terms of new things you're trying or focusing on.
There is so much inward stuff and so much outward stuff. So
okay, a lot.
Great question. Like many organisations within the sexual violence sector, we've grown significantly during the pandemic, and partly that's because there's been a government focus, like a national focus on funding. Some of that growth was growth that we sort of planned, large bids that we put in pre-pandemic, but I think that we also were impacted by increase of funding through the Ministry of Justice and through the Home Office, and there's a lot of I think receiving government funding comes with its own challenges, because actually often there's a real urgency from their end, from their timeframes, to spend it by a certain date or to do the things that they've told us that they want us to do. And there are questions around whether the government fund in the best way, and I think those questions will always be there. And I think it's a balance for us around wanting to deliver the work that we know needs to be done, and wanting to, I guess, recognise that in many ways we are well placed with our history, with our ethos, with our expertise to do that, to do that work, but trying as well to, I guess, protect us as organisations from some of the government pressures. So it's quite a balancing act. I guess what I wanted to speak to is that we've grown a lot during the pandemic, and of course we're hybrid working, and sometimes when you have organisational growth, you don't necessarily have all the props in place for the growth. So you sort of have some props in place, but there were some areas that you didn't realise you needed props for. And one of the things that when I have my annual appraisal with Sophie, my lovely chair of trustees, I feel like every year I say, oh, if I'd have known what I know now a year ago. And I think that probably be the same absolutely every year.
Definitely a sign of all that learning. Yeah.
Definitely. I think one of the things we've gotten a lot better at is consulting, listening. We obviously there's a limit to how much you can consult, both with staff, and externally. But I can't make decisions on my own, because actually, I've employ a huge number of absolutely amazing women. They're a fantastic resource, and they are what makes Survivors Network. So listening to their thoughts and their feedback, and that might be things that have gone well, but also things that haven't gone so well, things that we want to do in the future, but things that we don't want to do in the future, and really creating a kind of a feedback loop that feels, when you first start, it feels difficult, it feels clunky, and it needs smoothing. But actually, once it becomes just part of the process, and that's sort of where we're getting to. We're not in a place where it doesn't feel clunky at all, but we're in a place where it's feeling more smooth. And so I think that's one of the, looking at where decisions are made, looking at who holds the power, what the hierarchies are, looking at who we need to be able to engage in those conversations and decisions, because there's a lot of talk across the sort of feminist sector around non-hierarchical organisations, but actually there are power dynamics, there are people who make different decisions, and we all need to also bring our adult self to those conversations, and we're not always our adult self either. So and all we can do is to sort of speak about these sort of power issues, and also recognise how those power dynamics might affect our service users, some of whom might be us. There isn't this distinction between, you're the staff, and we're all living in this society where misogyny and violence against women is and violence against gender diverse people is endemic. And I feel like probably some of the good stuff that's happening internally is looking at our support structures, looking at our well-being, bringing feminist leadership training to everybody throughout the organisation, and ensuring that we're all having these conversations, recognising the part that we have to play, and also sort of owning that responsibility for the decisions, because we all have something to feed in, but we also all need to sort of own the responsibility around that. And then if I think about some of the outward facing work that we're doing and engaging with the community, we really identified a significant risk in the proportion of our funding that was coming from local and national government. And actually that was a risk in terms of, if the government priorities change, or if we fall out of favour, or, so we wanted to increase the proportion of our funding from, from other areas. And so we quite kind of boldly approached the trustees with a plan to set up I guess a sort of social enterprise business development arm of the organisation. And we set it up over a year ago. And that's very much one of those things that I think if I knew now what I know, it was a my trustees are so supportive and really, like forward thinking and innovative and dynamic, but also really hold the risk very well. Mm-hmm. So we've brought in a head of business development, but we're also comms and insight and had a sort of a data role and a service user involvement co-production officer role, so that actually this team consult with our service users and our staff to help design sort of campaigns or fundraising initiatives that then bring in unrestricted income, so that we can be responsive and that we can develop the services that survivors tell us that they want, and the support that our staff flag that the clients that they're working with could do with, and that this kind of business development team sits at the heart of the organisation. They're not someone who does something over there, but they're right at the centre. I like to think of, I don't know if it quite works, but the analogy I really like is a bit like a chocolate fountain. So the team are and they're putting the content out, or they're asking the questions, and then they're gathering it up, and then that's generating sort of like the income that's helping to fund the services that we want. And it's very much a journey, and sometimes I feel like, is this too ambitious? But other times I think, or is this not the right time? But other times I think, we don't know what's going to happen in another year's time with our funding, or with, the world feels like a very unstable place, and actually diversifying our income and really amplifying our use of data and service user voice to share our message, to make sure that Survivors Network is something that everyone in Sussex knows about, not something filled with shame that people will hear about when they, if they might need our services. But you might have, seen our logo or attended a training session or been to a fundraising event, and actually it's a known and trusted brand, and we're proud to be here, and we're proud to be doing the work we're doing. But there we are. That's a huge that's my manifest.
No. I'm there with the chocolate fountain metaphor. Like, totally. I think flow is so important, and where you get your money from, I think, is an absolutely central question, because we live in this world where it's important. I'm sure, like a lot of us who, if we could get rid of that and we could just do the work, that would be great. But it's just a reality, and I feel like, it's very wise to be thinking about financial flow within organizations like yours, because to do the work, like, you need this sense of trust and faith, and I guess the only thing we can be sure of is that our services will always be needed. Like that, this sector does not have that problem. Oh, maybe nobody will need us. I guess there are certain industries out there that are worried about that. Not a concern here. Like, the concern here is being placed in this position where you want to provide something, but not given enough resource in order to do it properly. And then how do organizations like yours balance that?
I know you and I have spoken about this sort of scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset.
Versus the abundance. I think actually it's very timely, because we're running an online process at the moment called the Feminist Way, where for the whole spring we're gathering and we're exploring different themes every week, with meditation and online circle and like community stuff. And the week's theme this week is power, and I think it's such a central one, because our societies kind of really center power. And I think one of the things we've kind of realized is even the way we think about power, the way we talk about power, like literally the language we use, the questions we ask, like all of that is in itself so painted by the system that I found it essential to completely step away and try to see power in a really different way to kind of get my to find my grounding and my footing in a way that I can trust. It's been well, what day are we on? Is it Tuesday? I'm not very good at that game. But it's I think it's one of those things. I won't just do it this week. I think, of course, it'd be something I'd be thinking about a lot. But I go to nature as what does nature say about power? How does it role model what power is and how nature is in relationship with it? And I'm finding that really useful. And I feel like it can almost be a paradox for organizations like yours, where you have these kind of feminist principles, but you have to live and work and exist and survive in this society. And so, yeah, of course you're going to have hierarchies, and, you know, nature also has hierarchies. That's okay. It's about, but that there's still a way of being in relationship with power that can be fundamentally healthy and good for everyone. Yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously that's something we could talk about for the rest of our careers.
Definitely. And I think that it's just so important to have the conversations, because there are, you know, we also have when we're delivering services, we've also got responsibilities around, for example, compliance or quality, or, you know, and it's really important, well, I certainly think it's really important that we come with from a starting point of kindness, but actually having the boundaries there is also really important, and that's important in sort of everything that you do. And I think it just throws up, you know, we're kind of making judgments, we're drawing the line somewhere all the time in terms of, for example, between kindness and boundaries, or between ensuring that our clients have a fantastic, you know, how get their needs met, but also making sure that our staff aren't giving so much of themselves that they're actually depleting themselves. So it may well be that we're drawing a limit on the client support we can offer, or it may well be, you know, it's really challenging, I think, particularly with the huge demand for the services compared to what our resources are.
Yeah. You're placed in this really, I don't know what word to use to describe it, this position where, of course, demand is going to outstrip resource massively, and so then there are some important choices to make around that. But, you know, with an abundance mindset rather than a lack of mindset, I'm always struck, we actually, you know, these services and this sector was not founded on the idea that even, you know, it was constructed around kitchen tables with nothing except each other, community, and a desire to help, and a willingness to see each other. And, you know, we haven't, that's still there. Like, so this, you know, this more modern world where it's like, it's all about getting contracts to provide services, and it's like, how do we bridge the journey from the roots of a lot of these organizations to where they are today? And I guess for me, the key thing would be like, what questions does that evoke to help guide the way we do the work now? And I wonder, I feel like a lot of our work at the Consent Collective, because we very consciously choose not to play that funding thing in that way, I feel like it gives us a bit of space to really look at that community side of it a lot more, or give that a lot of focus. I'm really curious about, yeah, that bit where we come together to build stuff and make stuff happen together because we've got the energy and the will to do so. Like, can there be more of that? Yeah, who knows? It's certainly not dull work, is it?
No, definitely not. And I think we need to be careful not to set ourselves unrealistic expectations as well of what we're able to achieve. I think having the conversations is really important, and and having change is really important, but also we need to recognize sort of sitting still and, you know, resting and considering what we're going to do next as well is really important. Sometimes I feel like I get overwhelmed by the urgency of, you know, perhaps looking at, I don't know, who's absent in our, you know, client data, who isn't accessing our services, what, you know, wanting to affect change at a faster pace. Maybe that's that fire inside of me burning.
Yeah.
But it's also really important to recognize all the good things that we have achieved as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think celebration is so important, and like it's just like it's this important energy that we need to tap into regularly, as well as, and I feel like in the sector, it's like if the sector was a friend, I'd want to kind of sit them down and say, no, really, we need to celebrate, like, like we need a party. Like we need also that energy too, to kind of celebrate all the things we do have and the things that we've got that have got nothing to do with funding. Like what you also have is, I'm sure, is a lot of people who are inspired to volunteer for you to, you know, I mean, we get a lot of emails that people would love to come and get a job at the Consent Collective. Like there's a lot of really good energy for this work. And I think sometimes when we're faced day in, day out with all the things we don't have, and all of the institutions and organizations who feel like they're an obstacle to, you know, they're kind of getting in our way rather than helping with what we're trying to do, I think maybe we could also try and balance that out with celebrating the stuff we have in abundance, like, because it's good stuff. Like, you know, it would be the envy of some other sector that, you know, can't attract people to volunteer or is worried that they're not really needed. Like no, we have a lot of good stuff going on.
That's true. I do love looking at the Survivors Network Instagram account, because there's, you know, loads of fantastic work going on and people doing all sorts of great fundraising, or just sharing our posts or acting as advocates or asking how they can, you know, support survivors, or standing up to misogyny and sexism. So it's or just offering kind of support, love and care to one another. So
yeah,
that's probably somewhere where I go to get a bit of, like what you're saying, a bit of
yeah,
balance.
a bit of balance. Yeah, and seeing that ripple effect too. And actually, I think part of the process we're on now, because we're traveling, and part of how we're traveling is house sitting. So like this gorgeous scene behind me is not because this is my home at all. This is someone else's home, and but we're very consciously, you know, when you house sit, you someone else is opening up their home to you whilst they go off on holiday, and there's a generosity in someone, not just a trust, but there's a please come and enjoy my home, and, you know, look after my cat or my dog or whatever is here. And I feel like I'm learning to receive generosity on this trip too. There's it's very generous of people to let us live in their homes. Like it's like the ultimate, you know, to open up your doors to a stranger. And I realized when we started that I had some learning to do with that, you know, like, oh, this isn't unexercised muscle, because I'm used to being the person that, hey, look at the lovely thing I've made for you, or look at the thing I've done for you. Like generosity, it felt like I was aware of it going in one direction. And I feel like with this, there's something balancing. It's like, oh no, we are grateful recipients of generosity, and there's something about the flow in that feels really healthy. And maybe I want to add to that, especially because we work in this sexual violence sector. There's something healthy about trusting strangers that I didn't realize I needed in my life. You know, just trusting I guess it's about consent, that the offer is real, that the space is safe, that it is okay for two women to do that. So it's been, that side of it's been really healing for me.
Wow, that's great. And just approaching I guess you must be in some ways opening yourself up to sitting with uncertainty.
Yeah, I think we, I mean, gosh, haven't all of us over the last couple of years, if not prior to that in your life, because of your life experiences anyway. So I think, yeah, definitely. But there's something, of course, I love like sometimes the elegance of some of the lessons that life is trying to show you. Because, yeah, I guess on paper you could say we're living with more uncertainty because you don't have a permanent home. So, and does that, and I think when I had one, the thought of losing that home, I think a big driver for a lot of my life has been, can I afford to pay the rent? Like, because doing this work does not pay well. Yeah. And it doesn't, in my experience, pay reliably. So it was always every year a genuine question, because I would, especially because I was mostly, well, I've been self-employed my whole career. So it's not like you have a job with a salary that you just like, I don't know what kind of year this is going to be. And so home for a long time was maybe the stable thing that I thought gave me security. But now we've been traveling for 6 months from Thursday this week. So it's been 6 months of no home. And you know, what I'm smiling at is I always used to worry about paying that rent. The truth right now is I'm not paying rent. And I'm living in these houses that are other people's houses, and I'm constantly passing through. But there's something about life, there's something about living with the instability of not having a home, and the way we're doing it now. I appreciate this isn't everyone's story, but we're discovering that actually there are hundreds of homes we can stay in next week. Like they're not ours. So there's something about, gosh, all those months I worried about not paying the rent, actually I could have done house sitting. So that I'm probably not articulating it very well, but there's something about thinking this was going to be very uncertain and not very stable, and actually what I find my feet on is really solid ground, because I know that it's okay to live without that permanent base. And not only is it okay, it's kind of so far been fun and exciting. So
yeah. Another really interesting thing that's come to my mind is that we often look at other people and think that they've got everything sorted. So for you to say that there'll be, obviously I recognise you're academic and a trainer, and you're talking about level of instability, but I think that I would have looked at you and thought, oh no, she's got everything together.
Yeah.
I think we look at ourselves and somehow feel we don't measure up in comparison to how we imagine everybody else's life is. And I think it can be really helpful to sort of recognize that, and recognize that I guess the struggles are real for everyone, but that it's really easy to imagine, to wrongly imagine what other people's lives are like from what we see on the outside.
Yeah, totally. I think we often would think we're the only ones feeling those feelings, and of course, but we're in this strange system that I feel sets us up to feel like this, to constantly set us up to not feel good enough, to not feel adequate, to be constantly striving towards something that actually isn't real, like it's not obtainable. There is no end destination in my experience. And I feel like our relationship with home and wealth and income, and what metric of success are we talking about when we fail? Because I've often thought, because we're privileging often financial indicators of success, but if you were to measure the quality of somebody's life by the amount of free time they had, or the quality of their relationships, their spiritual health, then we would be asking different questions, I guess. And on those metrics, I feel like, yeah, what we're doing at the moment with the traveling is giving me a lot of time to be able to focus on those metrics. And I've made myself a promise. I have promised myself I am not going to work towards opening a retreat center so that when I'm on a retreat center, I'm working a 70-hour week, to, you know, in front of a computer in order to keep the retreat center open. That is not, and I could see that path. I could see how easily I could have accidentally done that. I was like,
really
can't.
imagine that.
Yeah. And I was like, no, that isn't going to be it. I want to be really there. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes.
Well, I guess articulating that that's a possibility, that you might, you know, saying it out loud, recognizing the slippery slopes or the pathways that we don't want is as important as looking at the areas that we do want. And I guess perhaps also, I mean, one of the key components of my job now is the risk register, looking at risks, but actually recognizing the risks inherent for myself, as well as looking at the risks inherent for other people, and having those mitigating factors in for myself as well. It's something I've learned is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I as a kind of I guess closing thought to our conversation, I'm kind of recognizing that we're full of spring at the moment, and I was just wondering, in terms of like either intentions or hopes for the future, or thinking about seeds we could be planting right now, hoping to see them nurture and grow. Like, what are your wishes or intentions right now, whether that's for something that might bear fruit this summer, or if it's maybe a longer burn process? What are you planting this spring?
So I think that it's about connections. It's about all different sorts of connections. We're at Survivors Network, and you know, across the world, we're looking at sort of re-emerging into a post-COVID world, or a living with COVID world, maybe not post-COVID, but and actually recognizing the importance of connections, and of the different ways to make connections, and the different ways that work for different people in terms of making connections. Because actually, for some, you know, for some of us, predominantly working from home is really important. For some of us, we might want to be connecting with our colleagues or friends in the evening in a pub or something. But for some of us, we might want to be going on a dog walk, or we might want to be having a chat on the phone. It might be about a one-to-one connection, but just really being, and yeah, a myriad of other, you know, ways of making connections, and just being really open to how important all the different sorts of connections are. And so I think I've been thinking about that a lot. And I think that's the sort of seeds I'm wanting to plant, is not just going back to the way that we connected before the pandemic, but being really open to lots of other connections, and really, I guess, recognizing the nurture that you can get in different ways from different connections.
Nice. I like the sound of that. I'm gonna plant alongside your seeds. I think one that's in very close relationship to it. I feel like what we're exploring this year and building up to this summer is, I would love for us to come together in this space of people who very much care about sexual violence and relationship abuse, come together in slightly different spaces. You know, so right now when we gather, sure, we might gather for a professional meeting or training, or a conference. Maybe it's a political protest, or it's a vigil. And I would love to start building something that is different to all of them, that is centered on healing, but recognizing that we can do that together too. So probably closer to a vigil than most of the other things I just mentioned, but not reacting to something that's just happened, something that is more, I guess, inwardly focused. So yeah, I'm hoping, that would be a different way of connecting, as a space. You're invited.
Oh, I love
Bring the
it.
team.
It sounds great. It sounds great. Yeah, a healing vigil, or a healing together.
Yeah, so we're working towards a ceremony, a process. We can do this, you know, something simple, but together with intention, outside. Keep it easy. But yeah, that's where my big soul seeds are right now for that work.
Oh,
And when we travel back down this, we'll be back down this way in the summer again. So hopefully that time we can get to meet you in person and the team. And it will be a glorious summer, and we can meet outside, and it will be beautifully dry and beautifully warm, and yeah, be great to do that. But thank you so much for creating this postcard from Sussex with me today, Jay.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing the postcard with me. It's been lovely. It's been just such a lovely conversation.